want to welcome you all to the Spring 2014 Capstones. We're really excited this year. We've got two different real-world projects that we're working on. One is through Youth Wave Ministries with Nancy and Forrest Gregory that Team Prestige has been working with. And they'll fill you in on what Youth Ministries is all about. They're the directors for that organization, so they'll give you that update. And then after this initial presentation, we will have the Professional Workforce Training Center will be the second one, where we have two project teams working on that particular project, and that will follow this one. But make sure you all get treats. We've got some faculty here. We want to make a quick announcement too to support our math faculty here. We've got the Introduction to Statistics class being offered this summer. For those of you that still need some gen eds, Gary's here and promoting that class, so get it in. It's days, right, Gary?
Mornings, 3 days a week this summer. That's a college transferable.
Of you that are looking for an English, another gen ed. So we want to get people, if you're interested in that, email me so that we can get the numbers for that course, and then they'll put it on the schedule and offer it as well.
And would that
Okay.
be evening or whatever you want?
Evenings or daytime. I know, I can kind of put that in an interest email as well, okay? But looking forward to seeing what the culmination of all their 2 years of hard work has produced. So, Team Prestige.
I'd like to say good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming in. We are Prestige Worldwide. I'd like to start off by thanking Forrest and Nancy Gregory and Anoka Technical College for this opportunity and getting this organized. Without that, this wouldn't have been possible. And we'd like to thank you for that. And then again, we are Prestige Worldwide. My name is Shane Pintz. I am the project manager. I also serve software development and database roles for this presentation, or for this project. To my right here, we have out of order here, but we got Josh here, who's also served database software needs, Jake Sweedland, networking, Spencer Kubat, our web guru, and Thomas Wesley, also on networking. I guess we can start the presentation. So basically, our mission statement, Prestige Worldwide, we provide high-quality IT solutions for our clients using our knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to exceed project and client requirements. So why are we here today? Basically, I think this video will really help summarize what Forrest and Nancy do with their youth wave ministries.
Chose Youth Way Ministries this year as our beneficiary because we could see a real impact that they're making on a community, not just their own, but they're expanding to reach out to other communities.
Primarily a youth operation, a youth center, but in order to reach the youth, we also have adult programming that reaches out to the families. We try to build community, try to support the community as much as we can. We have an early childhood reading program during the summer, a math and more program, a summer education program. We have our homework help program during the school year. We have our Keepers of the Faith Girls Club.
What we hope to do with the girls is get them involved in alternate activities and find things they're interested in. Just getting them out of the park is a major thing because it expands their ideas of what life can be, because they have, you know, such a limited perspective on what life is, and getting them to dream bigger dreams and realize that if they work hard enough, they can have a different life than what they grew up in.
One of the things that we're most noted for is the Man of Market program that we started here. And last year we passed out 3.5 million pounds of food. We serve about 4,000 people weekly. it has turned into an enormous operation. My understanding is we're one of the bigger food distribution programs in Minnesota.
When we realized that 27% of the food we produce in the United States is tossed, we thought this is a great way of recovering and redistributing that food. So we felt that there was something we could do to contribute to the food that would normally be tossed and thrown away to be redirected into the hands of people that really need it.
Our day starts in the morning with picking up rescue food from a local Target and Cub. And then that comes back here, and it can be 8, 9, up to 12,000 pounds of food. The idea that they come in and they select their own food, it's a different feel. They feel better about themselves coming here than a traditional food shelf, because some of that dignity is restored.
We're hoping that this not only can be something for folks who come, but as folks volunteer, both our regulars as well as folks who are clients that become volunteers, we're hoping that this will then give them a renewed sense of purpose and contribute to the wider community. We're really hoping this can contribute as a catalyst to bettering our community here in Blaine.
Forrest and Nancy's vision is to build a scalable and repeatable model so they could actually implement this in other high-density, low-income neighborhoods in Anoka County and perhaps in the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
I feel that there's a huge need to have a program put together where we can just say, here's the program. We'll come down and help you guys get it started. This is the way you get your funding. This is how you get support. This is what you say when you go to churches and businesses and stuff like that. And this is the way you win the community over that you're trying to serve.
The kids naturally gravitate here, and they gravitate here because it's a place to go, a place where they feel safe, a place where they can come to and see each other. It's about creating a community, it's about character building, it's about generosity, respect, and goodness. Goodness within this community.
Just giving me and my friends a place to hang out, you know what I'm saying, where it's not like we're sitting on the side of the road chilling, you know what I'm saying? But, I don't know, it's definitely been a big part of my life.
So basically, Youth Way Ministries has hired Prestige Worldwide to develop a website and database to enhance their statistical tracking and promotional needs for their Man and Market program. This is a first phase of a multi-phase project. We're going to start off by talking more about the work requirements here. Basically, what we're going to provide here with this website and database project, we're going to be able to link to their Youth Way Ministries website, display videos, link to PayPal and give MN for donations, provide content that highlights information regarding Man and Market program, provide content that highlights that. Also software requirements, we decided to use open source, so PHP and MySQL for that. And also the server OS though is not an open source, but our networking team will talk about that more here in a little bit. Also, we excuse me, the database was designed for tracking guests and second harvest product pickup statistics for Man and Market with the reporting functionality. And then also we have set up and linked to social media. Just a little ahead of myself. Okay, so project objectives basically is kind of an overview of the overall project. Just we develop the project plan, you know, create the network structure, design, develop the database, design and develop the website, implement and test the database and web functionality, and then eventually close today to close out and transfer. So again, this is kind of an overview of everyone's. We're going to go more specific into each one when we get into each group here. But for the work breakdown structure, we have the concept phase where we examine ideas for the project, research hardware, software options, determine which ideas benefit the organization the best, decide which ideas for the project can realistically be completed. The planning phase, creating the project scope, creating the work breakdown structure, the schedules, determining the resources that we need. And then within the development, that's kind of the project launch and project performance. basically starting to distribute the appropriate tasks and then adjusting as needed, testing and troubleshooting, and then eventually the implementation and closeout. And I'd like to switch it over here to Tom on the networking side.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So the network part of this, we worked on, setting up essentially the container that all of the website, the database, all the data went into. So we had to create the box, if you will, that everything was put into. We had to first determine, what the networking requirements were, what kind of software we're going to run. Shane had mentioned before that we were running open source software, so we had to figure out how we're going to do that. We ended up using a Windows operating system, Server 2012, for both the SharePoint and for what we call the WAMP server, which I'll explain later, which is for the website and the database. And then on top of that, then we use open source software for that, and I'll get into details there. The collaboration needs, we decided that SharePoint would be what we wanted to use. It's a great piece of software. They'll go into much more detail about it, but you're able to collaborate, you're able to share documentation, even as far as like checking out documentations and so forth. Of course, we had to develop a plan to get both accomplished. As far as a timeline, on our work breakdown structure, we had figured out how long it would take us to do each part, as far as setting up the server, getting the software installed, getting it configured, getting up and running. And then, of course, that ties into configure the server for tasks. We had to actually make these servers do the tasks that we wanted them to accomplish. I'm going to hand this over to Jake. You're going to talk about SharePoint.
Hi, my name is Jake. Thanks for coming up. I'm here to talk to you about the SharePoint and the way that we set it up, the functionality of SharePoint, and how it is used to help us out as we executed this project. First of all, what we did is we have a server over there, and we installed Microsoft 2012 R2 edition onto it. We then assigned it a static IP address and connected it to the IT program domain that we have set up here already. We adjusted some sharing settings and firewall settings so we were able to communicate successfully with the rest of the network. And then we installed Hyper-V, which is Microsoft's virtualization software. In Hyper-V, we then created our virtual environment. Our virtual environment consists of of 3 virtual servers with different functions for each one of them. On the first one was our Active Directory server. We installed Active Directory for the sake of managing centrally all of our virtual servers, and then installed WebIIS, which is Internet Information Services, which helps integrate the web application known as SharePoint. On the SQL server, the second virtual server that we created, we installed SQL version 2012, and then we created a database known as a farm. And then the next thing we did was go into the SharePoint server. We installed the prerequisites for SharePoint, and then we're able to install SharePoint onto the SharePoint server and connect it with the database that's on the SQL server. And then from there, what we did is we actually created the SharePoint website. So the way that we were able to make all of this happen is, first of all, we used a VPN, which is a virtual private network. And what it does is it creates a secure tunnel between a private network, like the one at my house, over a public network, like the internet, to another private network, like IT program. So it generates a tunnel using a protocol, layer 2 tunneling protocol is what was used, and secured it by using IP security protocol. This allows for you to have a secure tunnel between 2 private networks over a public network, so if anybody were intercepted in the information, they couldn't read it or decrypt it unless having the proper key. The reason that we used it was to share the resources from our servers and also to use remote desktop. Remote desktop was a key function that we used in order to work from home on these servers. It helped a lot in case we couldn't commute or if we had to find extra time to work on things. The way that remote desktop works is it will create a seamless interface over a VPN connection to create the effect that you're sitting right in front of the server that's in a different location. So the way that works is use the RDP protocol, which connects to your ISP, and then from there it requests the signal. And the reason why we used it, like I said, was because we wanted to work from home or different offices or any off-site private network. And this is a little bit of a breakdown of our network structure that we use for SharePoint. The top, Windows Server 2012, represents the server over there. We named it Capstone, and we connected it to the IT program. That's the domain that we used, and under it you can see the static IP address that I gave it. Through there we installed the Hyper-V, and then the 3 machines under it are the virtual machines that we created: SQL, Active Directory, and SP. Those are all the names of them at the domains that they consist in. We gave them all 2008 server, gave an IP address, and then we were able to connect MySQL, Active Directory, and SharePoint. So those are the main functions of those virtual servers. So now to get into SharePoint and how we used it and exactly what happened. We installed the SharePoint infrastructure on the SharePoint server and then connected it with a database on the SQL server, and from there it generated a port number that we were able to host our website on and create additional websites for each one of the teams today. It's used for communicating and collaborating. We used it as a team tool so that we could share, upload, just a place to store all of our information that's secure. We made the website a specific Prestige Worldwide website to share and access all of the information. So if we were on the servers here, or if we were anywhere else using the VPNs and the remote desktop tool, we were able to access that website anywhere that we weren't directly connected to the infrastructure application on the computer. We were able to track our WBS and our progress through SharePoint. Because it's Microsoft SharePoint, it was integrated with a project, and we were able to upload our WBS and populate calendars and things like that, making Gantt charts. So we were able to go through the SharePoint website and have all of our work documents on there. Now if you turn your attention over to the screen, I'm going to demonstrate how the SharePoint website works. So like I said, this is the website that specifically pertains to Prestige Worldwide. Each one of our teams has one, and you can customize it however you want, whatever helps you the best with accomplishing tasks as a team. We put in an announcement feature, so if there was an announcement that had to be made that wasn't on the WBS, it was here, and then everybody can view it. Another thing that we did, we created logins on Active Directory through our server for the website team, the database team, the networking, and there was an administrator one. So every time somebody logs into the website, you can tell who is on there and exactly what they were doing. We have a calendar that set up all of our meetings, so we were able to all essentially view this and understand when the meetings were and how the schedule worked. And then here is a document upload section. This right here is the database documents. And as you can see, the administrator uploaded that. And if you wanted to download it, it's as simple as clicking on it right there. This folder right here is for the HTML documents. You can see who uploaded all of these and at what times. And like I said, if you just want to click on this, it will download directly to your downloads. We put contact information for the members of the team, just in case you didn't have a phone number or a email address to contact people through. So we have contact information here. You can also download these as well and share them. We have a link section, which was, what this consisted of was kind of tutorial videos just helpful resources that we could come up with and centrally store so that we could have access to them in case we were running into a specific problem. So these were able to help us in the way that we could brush up on some of our knowledge or if we were running into a certain point. So the shared documents is probably the best feature of SharePoint, and the way that it works is you can upload something to the shared documents. It will keep track of who uploaded it. As you can see, there's networking, administrator, website, database. So you can see who uploaded it, and then right next here to the icon of the file that's on there, you can see a little green icon that's a SharePoint icon, and as you hover over it, it says who it's checked out by. Checking out a document just means that you took the document, you're editing the document, and while you do that, other people can't check out the document because it'll show them that you have it, and then you can check it back in for other people to use, and then it'll keep track of who had it for how long. You can put comments in about what you modified about the document, and then it will, again, keep track of who the last person that modified the document. And then that brings us to the test, the WBS that we uploaded and synced to help us track the progress. This is our actual WBS that we created as a team. It goes through all the tests and predecessors and things like that for the website. As you can see, their whole WBS throughout the whole project. Track the progress and see what percent you are done, if you're completed or not. So this, in terms of a collaboration tool, this was key in helping us get everything together. At first it was an idea of using Gmail Drive, Dropbox, emailing, anything you could think of to share. But this is the most secure, it's the most practical, and we were able to set it up fairly quickly. So, that's nice.
As I mentioned before, part of the networking, we created containers essentially. I'm going to direct your attention, I am working off of this slide, but I want to look over here. Pardon me just a minute. Okay, so what we use to create the server that we use to host the website and the database is Windows Azure. And Windows Azure, you heard the term, in the cloud, used in the cloud. Windows Azure is a cloud-based system that allows you to create virtual machines, servers, if you will, to not have to have the hardware on site or rent the hardware for someone else. It's usually on an annual or a monthly basis that it's essentially renting space. They have large server farms around the country. It depends on where you're located. You select the area that you'd like it to. Let's use the term affinity, and you can create an affinity to that particular area that you're at. This here is actually the site where you would create the Windows Azure machine. As you can see, we created one here called Man Market. In order to do that, we had to not only create the machine, which is running Windows Server 2012, we also had to create a storage here, which is essentially your hard disk, hard drive, but that is also virtualized. And then tie them together. If we needed multiple servers, we would have created more to create those services. As it is, the virtual machine that we created was sufficient for the job. It's an awesome technology. Scalability, meaning the ability to ramp it up or lower it down based on your usage, is all virtualized. We can set up several servers. It can trade, if one's getting overloaded, it can load balance to another. It's a great concept. It's also great for a project like this where we're not sure exactly what we need. So we could have ramped it up if we needed to. Let's see. Jake had mentioned remote desktop, but that's how we get access to this server. I'm right now on remote desktop here, you can see here on the top. This is a server, not allowed to look at. Like I said, this is kind of the nuts and bolts, the container for all the cool stuff that these guys did talk about. But what we ran on this Windows Server 2012, we installed an open source because we were required to do an open source software based on the needs of our man market. And this is WAMP server. It's Windows, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Apache is a web server. MySQL is the database language or container. And PHP is the connection between the database and the website. As you can see, not a lot to see here. It actually was a fairly straight ahead install. Just ran the software, got it installed. There was some configuration to do as far as what the home page would be, you know, sort of thing like that. But mostly pretty straight ahead. This is what's running on the server right now. One nice thing about these two as far as backup goes, these use geo-replication is what they call it. And then because it's a virtualized environment, on the particular hardware farm that this is located, there is 3 other copies of this server there, plus another one replicated on another server farm in another geographical location. So we have backup for all that data too, because they would be very upset if it disappeared. All right, so that's it for the demonstration. And essentially the slide that I had created is what I just talked about here. I just kind of wanted to give you a breakdown of what we were doing here. Okay, outcomes. I'm going to let Jake handle the SharePoint outcomes, and then I will take the Azure and the unsuccessful part.
So the outcomes of what we accomplished were we successfully installed the Windows Server 2012 SharePoint right over there, and then installed the Hyper-V, and along with, and inside the Hyper-V we were able to virtualize the 3 machines successfully using Windows 2008. All the setup and installing of the MySQL, the SharePoint, all of the operating systems was also all a success.
As far as the Windows Azure part, as far as our outcomes, virtualization Windows 2012, first went successfully, you just saw that. Virtualizing the storage was successful, and then connecting that too so that the virtual machine knew what storage it was connected to. That was all successful. And like I mentioned before, the WAMP installation actually went very smoothly. There was some configuration, but that was about it. Unsuccessful. In relation to the SharePoint, we were attempting to virtualize the SharePoint server at first also on Azure. The limitation was not Azure, it was the account that we had with Azure. We were not able to create 3 virtual servers under the same username. We had a limitation. Now, under normal circumstances, you can create as many as you want as long as you have the capability. So we ended up going to a live, hardware base for the SharePoint. And then, of course, the installation and setup for SharePoint Server 2013 did not go as well as planned. There were some requirements that we were unable to work the details out for, so we ended up rolling it back to 2010? Yes. Yeah, 2010, SharePoint 2010 to make it work with Windows 2008 R2. So, a little mixed bag there. We have 2 mice up here, and I keep grabbing the wrong one. Well, what we learned. Well, we learned through trial and error how to set up SharePoint 2010. We went through several incarnations of that server, getting it to work. So we ended up doing that. We ended up figuring out some workarounds to getting it configured with the type of hardware and software that we had to work with. And as you can see, it's actually working great. Linking project and files to SharePoint, that took a little bit of doing. We had some issues with our project files getting uploaded. We had to change some communication between when syncing them up, but we got that to work. The Microsoft Azure setup and installation was awesome. I really enjoyed working with that. There was a lot of neat aspects to how simple it is. I mean, if I messed up on something when I started, I literally just wiped it out, started a new server, and it took me about 10 minutes. So it was great working with that. There's some quirkiness to it being in the cloud, where you have some of the controls are in panels that you're not thinking they would be in. So we learned where that stuff is located. And the setup, yeah, it kind of ties into the setup and installation that is unique to Azure in the sense of you're working with hardware, software on a piece of hardware. So it was, all in all, it was a great learning experience. Would you agree?
I agree.
All right, now we'll bring on the big guns. Database guys, the cool stuff. Thank you, Tom. Now what we're going to mix up nice here too.
All right, so right now we got our work breakdown structure. So we started with our information gathering. We need to understand what the client needs stored on their database. Also understanding what clients want to do with their data, gathering all the forms, Excel sheets to convert to the database, going over all, and then also touring several nanomarkets to further enhance our understandings of their unique needs. Then designing the database, we were, excuse me, normalizing the data was very important. Understanding where modification anomalies could occur to prevent them, ensuring that the design is sound to minimize redesign of future extensions to the database, enhancing the value of the data model, for users via creation of an entity relation diagram, and also ensuring design supports current queries and future queries whose details cannot be anticipated. So if you ever have future needs or future thoughts of wanting to know this statistic or that, it's set up to anticipate that in the future depending on what you want to add to it. Good. And then we created the database, or continuing on with the WBS, we created the database, installing and researching how to use MySQL Workbench 6.0. We connected MySQL Workbench 6.0 to Azure, implementing design by creating and testing the database in the MySQL Workbench, and then we entered what we call an industry dummy data to test the, making sure the reports work and stuff like that, and just create the finalized database. Switch to also, let's see here, collaborated with the web team for integration. That went really well. Researching how to just really integrate that with MySQL and PHP. I know Josh didn't have any experience with PHP going into this, so it's definitely a learning experience, but it's something that went really well, I believe. And then, let's see here, we've got that covered. And then we also did the testing, the troubleshooting, review, and then finalizing the database, technical support documentation, which will be coming soon for you for us. And then, yeah, I'd like to just pass over here to Josh and do a little bit of, no, they're going into yours. No? Yeah, cool.
All right, I'm Josh. I going to talk to you a little bit about some of these spreadsheets and what they all contain in them. On the left, we have the total, all the queries that had to be accounted for, which will be accounted for when we look at when we look at Spencer's. I'm sorry, Spencer. When we look at Spencer's website, and at the top is all of the guest information, which Shane's, that's the right name this time.
Yep, there we go.
Which Shane spent the most time with, and he'll get into further. And then that little tricky looking one down at the bottom right. At first, it looks simple enough, but when you start getting into it, you start to see it's not as innocent as it seems. And this is where I spent the majority of my time in the database, so I'm going to expand a little bit. So the first thing you got is you have where everything's coming from at the top. And then you have what's being accounted for right below it. You have in the big spaces you have how much is being counted. And then you have the dates across the side. There's other pieces of information there, but those are accounted for in the queries. So once we understand what's being accounted for, then we need to apply these relationships in order to successfully create a design. So you have the first one is the one-to-one, where you have the primary keys of each table directly connecting to each other. Now, if only they could all be that easy, but they're not, and they're rare, so double whammy. You've got the one-to-many relationships, where the primary key of one table is used as a foreign key in the other table, and this type of relationship is really what makes all these queries work. That's what the one-to-ones do too, but many-to-many are the most common. That's what you're going to see all the time. And then the many-to-manys, those are the bad ones. That's what's going to cause all your problems. So, which is actually something we ran into.
What?
Problems?
No.
Nah. But Vicky, if I got any of those wrong, just yell at me.
I wrote notes.
Thank you. You can go back and retroact my grade later. This is our finalized database structure for the food intake portion. If only we'd gotten there first, because our original, we went through a lot of designs. We sat down and we came up with a ton of designs for this. We had everything from 2 to 4, maybe 5 tables involved, until the very first design that we came across that worked on paper, emphasis on paper, was a 4-table design, which was the location, the linking table of the product pickup products, and then the fourth one, which was the extra products. That extra products was just a thorn. Because the information being contained was so different from the rest of it, and we didn't know what to do with that at first. So our first thought was, well, it's a difference. Let's just toss it in another table. Should work. But that's when the problems happened. Is when we started inputting information in. We started inputting the dummy data, and we realized that this isn't working out too well. So we got to take a step back, recollect our thoughts, and just go at this again. So then eventually this grand eureka moment was first off getting rid of that table entirely and just putting it into the products one, and then that delivery date. That delivery date was the key to making all of this work. Because in every design we had before this, that delivery date was inside of the products table, because that's just where we assumed that it was going to go. And we never thought to change it. So you move that over there, bada bing, there we go. It works. And it actually really ties into a big lesson that we learned about this, but I'll let Shane talk about his side of the database.
Thank you, Josh. So I basically was in charge of the guest intake and volunteer database. Right now, the volunteer database, we have something set up in place where you can at least take in new clients, but we were unable to get the full volunteer side. However, the guest intake is fully functional. Just to give you a little idea of the structure here, so we have everything starts right on that guest table. That's where you're going to be entering in everything at first. First name, last name, address 1, address 2. And as Josh mentioned, that PK on the top, that's primary key for the relation. So that's the unique identifier. So if you have 2 John Smiths, if they're different, that guest ID is going to distinguish the difference between the two. So you know this is John Smith A, John Smith B. And then talking about the relations, that line there says that one guest can be a part of one or many demographics. With that, and then in the demographics, that's where you can control if they're in crisis, prayer, if they're minor, or excuse me, how many minors are in the household, how many adults, how many seniors, and household income. And then we wanted to do that relation because they want to track each month and for every year how that demographic could potentially change. So let's say John Smith comes in and he's by himself one time when he comes for a visit. The next time he comes in, he brings in 2 friends or as a new addition to the house. So then he can come in and still update that demographic information. And so they can distinguish between which, on this demographic, what was the type of visits versus the other demographic. And then so from that demographic table, one of those unique demographics can be part of one or many visits. So if John Smith came in with his, has the kids in the household, you can make those specific visits. If the demographic changes, then you can identify that with the demographic ID as the foreign fee there with that relationship. And as you see with this volunteer table, we still have the groundwork set in there, so it is set up for future querying for the volunteer info. We still have you can still check if someone's a volunteer, because there is a checkbox from the Excel sheet that we converted over if they're volunteering or not. So we can tell them that visits column there if they're visiting, volunteering, or both. And then you also got your warnings and your notes there, which I know was you guys wanted to have in there as well. And then this was another database that it's not fully integrated into the website quite yet, so it'll be for the next Capstone team that decides to take it on. But we do have the foundation set for them, so you can still enter in new individuals. It's just about modifying and all that. But how this works is it's a little bit separate. So with Manna Market, or Youthway Ministries, they track their second harvest food intake from both the Manna Market and then also for any Youthway purposes. So this is Youthway purposes here. So if they can enter the information of the Youthway kids, so their first name, last name, date of birth, and then it's same principle of relations. One Youthway person can be part of one or many served IDs there. So that's identifying the date that they came in, if they had a meal, a snack, or both, and then if it was the first meal or snack for that reporting period. So again, that one's the foundation set for that one for the next group here. And then the outcomes, basically, oops, I'm losing my slides here. Okay, there we go. So, outcomes, I would say the design was definitely successful after many trials and error, but it was a successful. Transferring the report calculations was very successful. Forrest had that shot that we have, the Excel sheets doesn't do it justice. It was very complex, but it was quite organized, and all the calculations there were really helpful for us for transferring that over to the calculations onto the PHP website portion. And that kind of sets up with the MySQL Workbench setup and installation. Again, that went really well. That went really well. It was fun to work with my MySQL Workbench because I haven't had that opportunity to really work in there. I don't know about Josh, but did you have an opportunity to ever work in SQL before this, the Workbench? Nope. No. So it was really good experience for us there for the outcomes. And then the integration of the MySQL with PHP, that worked very well. Everything's, the queries that we intended for, the intake, the updating, stuff like that works very well. And then building the foundation for expansion, like we were mentioning with, even though we weren't able to get the full functionality for the volunteers and the Youthway guests, that foundation is still set for completing that, or getting that all done. Unsuccessful, well, we did have a database sync issue with the original hosting option. Long story short, there was just some controls they weren't giving us that we could make it an easier process for the testing and debugging. So we were able to jump with the networking team and host this on Azure through the cloud. And it's able to, you can go online, type it in, you'll be able to search and see the website right there as normally. So, and efficiency of the MySQL PHP code, that definitely works. It's just we could always, in coding, you can always make things more efficient, utilizing looping structures, decision structures. But when it came down to crunch time, sometimes you just got to work with what you got and copy paste with your codes and modify the variables from there. So that's where we're at there. And then I guess, Josh, what do you think we learned?
One of the biggest lessons we learned was to not overcomplicate things. So that's one of the reasons why we ran into problems, was because we were thinking too much. You just gotta, well, maybe some more. But just to realize, just to take that step back and to just reassess where you are is so vital, and it'll save you a lot of time.
And then communication being vital. Again, I always had a motto with the group is I'd rather have too much information than not enough. And I don't think there was really an issue at all with their communication. We had a lot of tools here. We've
You might have given us a little too much information.
Oh yeah. But yeah, but I feel the communication went really well. I think it was really crucial. And again, just to get things done, especially as a project manager and working many roles, it helps when the communication's getting to you. And then Joshua said, did you?
Yeah. Another one is starting from scratch is both a good thing and a bad thing. Because when you start from scratch, you have this blank slate that you can just work with and you can create whatever you want. But at the same time, you have to realize that there's boundaries, that there's this invisible fence that you should really stay away from so you don't get shocked. and just realizing where your limits are. So again, so you don't overcomplicate things.
And then the database and website synergy, that was really just how they work hand in hand. We had a lot of classes where they're working individually and kind of hinting, like with PHP, I know Spencer and I, when we took that class, at the very end, we were working only with one table, none of this multi-relation, only one primary key. So it was a really interesting learning experience to have to sync all of these different relations to that. And also, again, going back to not overcomplicating the design makes that a lot easier. And that also fits in with working with MySQL and PHP. We learned just a lot more in depth of how to use that. And it was surprising how just how we could really, when it came down to it, we got things done with it. So I'd say that was what we learned there with that.
I'd like to apologize for the next team that has to work with what I typed in for PHP. Just throwing that out.
He didn't have the class yet, so that's good. All right, and I'd like to switch things over to Spencer Kubat for our website.
So now we're done with the boring stuff. Let's get to business. All right. I'm Spencer. I did the web. I'm the web team or web guy. I did the web element of this whole project. So they had their database and everything, but the front end, there has to be users to use it, and there has to be input. So I created the front end where you can access all this stuff, and it makes it happen. So to start off, to begin with the concept and design, first I started out with me, of course, and Nancy, and looking at what they had, and then what they wanted, and how that fit with our functionality requirements. So we talked about, brainstormed what would work for the website, the style, a little bit with the database too. So we got that figured out, brainstormed some ideas, which allowed me to move on to creating wireframe layouts. So I drew up about probably like 7 or so layouts for the website, and I worked with those, and then I chose a few of them that I really liked, and then I mocked them up in Photoshop, got a good layout for them, so you could visualize what the website would look like in the final stage. Then I worked with Matt again with the clients, Forrest and Nancy, and we decided on what we liked and chose a mock that we thought was good and fit the needs of the client well and our functionality requirements. So we went with that, and we got client approval for going in with that layout and design. Okay, black one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so continuing with the WBS, development, testing, and implementing. So at first I started out by developing the HTML and CSS templates for just the basic layout of the website, so I could work around with the information inside of it. So I based it off of that mock-up that I designed in Photoshop that we approved of. And of course, when you get into the web element of it and coding, there's going to be changes. So there's minor changes throughout it, but I tried to keep the same style and template that we had decided on originally with that mock-up. So then once I had the template and the base down, then I was able to get the information from the client and use that to implement it into the website, into all the pages, so all the information and content was there. Just the informative information as well, and we were going to implement the database stuff into it as well. So we got all that in there, and then that's when we worked with syncing the database with the website using PHP, and that's where we had a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time coding PHP and making sure, doing a lot of testing, make sure it worked how we wanted it to. Like you saw, the database was, it could get pretty complex, so that kind of made, as that got harder, as that was more complex, that made this more complex as well. But we got working, so we did a lot of testing to do debugging with the website and the PHP elements of it to make sure it did work and to get it down to how we wanted it to work. So we did get that, and it started working good. So that would include collaborating with the DB team, me and Shane a lot, Josh too as well. Okay, so browser support. Browser support based on adaptive design. I programmed it to be responsive. That doesn't work. It works differently in different browsers, especially Internet Explorer. So there's a lot of testing in the different browsers to see how it would look and how it would adapt to those different browsers. But it works well in all of them. It's responsive. I'll get to more talking about that later as well, though, the responsive part. But for each different browser, you have to go with sometimes different minor adjustments to, like, if it's Internet Explorer, do this, do that. If it's a different browser, do other stuff. So there were minor adjustments to make sure it worked. But it set a good foundation for them building upon it in the future. Like Shane had mentioned, the next phase that works on this for their Capstone project. I think it's over there. All right. So the PHP and MySQL development. This is where me and Shane sat down a lot and collaborated to make sure their database elements matched up with intake forms. So all the input fields, the text input and stuff to go into the database. I created those forms and reports. Shane helped me make sure those were the right ones. It matched up well. All the IDs and names matched up to the database names and whatnot. So that was collaborating with them, and then after working a lot with them, we were able to finalize it and all the form elements and everything to make sure it went well with the database. So I think like halfway through, there was some minor changes from the client, adding a couple of things to tables, which we got in. So we worked on that a little bit, a few minor changes, but we got those in. And then did a lot of testing with the database and web application part of it, putting in a lot of dummy data, seeing if we pulled up, see how it had looked in the database, make sure all of our data was in there, getting in there as the right format, and just making sure it worked, it synced well, and it functioned how we wanted it. Alright, try to hurry up here, we're running a bit long. So for validation, I put, for now, simple HTML5 validation. I wanted to work more with it to make sure that it would be better validated, so when you're entering in the data, it would validate it, make sure the format of the text of the input is right, and it's the right number or text or whatever you want it to be. But for now, it's a simple HTML5 to make sure they at least enter in data for that element. Login, and also for the validation, they can continue on with that in the next phase to build onto that validation as well. For login, create a secure login script for accessing those secure pages with the sensitive information. So all those pages where you input the data into the database and pull their queries and pull reports and everything, secure that with login. So like Forrest can access that, but when you go to the website, no one else, unless you have that login information, you can't access that. All right, so outcomes. Successful. The database and web synergy, like Shane had mentioned, it worked really well. We had fun sitting down and getting it to work, and it worked out well. We're happy with the functionality of it and how it ended up working. I'm really happy with the website style. That was more on my end, the front end, making sure it looked good. I like keeping it simple but yet effective. A lot of people like to complicate their sites, but that was something I tried to make sure, keeping it simple and nice and easy for people to use. The forms are well organized, the input forms and everything. Requirements and change requests that were requested were completed. Unsuccessful. Code is functional and effective, but like Shane had mentioned, there's always something you can do to make the code more efficient. Like I think Vicky had said out there, comments. I think there can always be more comments. I did put a couple sorry comments in there.
Not what I meant.
But yeah, like Shane said, there's always something you can do to make it better, make it work better. But responsive web design, with the different browsers, it's hard. I wanted to implement it more, but it's responsive to a certain degree. It could be better, the format of it, when you shrink it down, but I'm pretty happy with the style of it. Alright, so what I learned. I hadn't had much of a chance to work in PHP before. I didn't have much experience with it. I gained a lot. Really happy with being able to work with it and gaining that experience along with Shane. And Shane helped me gain that MySQL SQL workbench experience as well. I hadn't worked with that at all. I'm not a database person, but it was cool to see the database elements fitting with the website. Time management, something we can all work on, and learned a few lessons from that. Team collaboration. You know, I think coding is hard, but it's amazing how hard it can be to collaborate our pizza orders, because we spent some long days on this, and we can't make food, we don't have time for that. So we would order a lot of pizza, so we spent a lot of time. Like, what do we want, what do you want, what not? That was almost harder than the code. That was, yeah. So I'm pretty sure we're all sick of pizza by now. And again, the last point, rewarding experience. I think it was really cool to work on an actual project that's going to be used by the client out there, and it's just cool to be a part of that and gain that experience. All right, so that would lead into Shane talking about the Microsoft project.
Due to some time constraints, I'm going to try to go through these slides a little bit faster so